Hello there, folks. It was revealed an additional 360,000 people did not renew their TV licenses, taking the estimated number of people without a license up to 2.84 million. There's a couple of important factors in the decline of people renewing their licenses. The first is people are becoming aware of what they can and cannot do with or without a TV license. Many people remain under the false impression they cannot even possess a television without having a license. This is simply not the case at all. One can have as many televisions as they desire, as long as they aren't using them to watch live television or BBC iPlayer. One can use any streaming service: Netflix, Disney+, Amazon Prime, YouTube. The list goes on, as long as live TV is not being watched. One can use catch-up services or on-demand services like Sky Go, Now TV, ITVX, Channel 4 On Demand, My5, all without a TV license, as long as one is not watching live television. The reality is, viewing habits are changing and more people are becoming aware they don't need a license. The second important factor is, people are realizing it's actually quite hard to prove a person without a TV license is watching live TV. So in summary, the biggest danger the BBC faces to its future and current funding model is education of the public. They are reliant on people being ignorant to what can be legally done without a TV license. Of course, right-wing nutters will have us believe people are choosing to not renew their licenses because of political reasons. That brings me to Jeremy Vile and Sammy Wilson. Just take a look at Sammy for a moment there. He has one of those faces it's almost impossible to not feel sorry for. He looks like a really sad clown without the makeup. The sort that trudges around the audience during the intermission at a crap circus, attempting to sell glow sticks to children. And then he opens his mouth, from which the bile doth spew. Both Sammy and Jeremy Vile are going to attempt to correlate an oversight on a diversity survey sent out by the BBC to its local democracy reporters to the decline in TV licence renewals. It's so absurd even Tory peer Ed Vaizey cannot contain his amusement. Let's take a look.
I think that's very good. Sammy Wilson, welcome to Jeremy Kyle Live. You've long campaigned for the BBC licence fee to be abolished, and it's interesting. I mean, I don't think this model, this funding model, is sustainable. I think Ed's absolutely right. People's viewing habits and watching habits have changed, have they not?
It's not sustainable, and I'm surprised that Ed can't give a commitment that the government would actually move away from this and start the BBC preparing for a new future, which without the licence fee. I mean, the licence fees are...
We're already off to a bad start, Sammy. Why would Ed Vaizey be able to give a commitment on behalf of a government he's not a part of? Hey...
A scandalous poll tax. It's regressive. It's imposed on many people. In fact, more than half the population don't actually use the BBC for news, for their main TV watching, etc., and yet they're forced to pay for it. And I would have thought that if the Conservative government does not grasp this nettle, the one thing you can be sure of is that a Labour Party, if it takes over in the future, will not, because of course the BBC regards the Labour Party as their darlings, and quite often, of course, pumps out left-wing propaganda. Another reason why I oppose having to pay for a service which I don't want, which in many cases I find does not reflect my views, and yet I have to pay for it.
I think also, Ed, and I know that you have I mean, Sam is passionate and I'm passionate, but let me give you an example why, ministers are going to look into reforms, a review, right? You've always said to me, people don't know how lucky they are. I think people's frustration. Let me read you a story over the weekend. The BBC's annual diversity survey, you're laughing, but for the local democracy reporters, it did not include the category, or whatever everybody's going to call it, of heterosexual. Other sexual orientation was the only option for straight people. Options: are you bisexual, a gay man, a lesbian, prefer not to say, or other sexual orientation. It is not surprising, is it not? You're laughing that people go, the BBC are turning into a bunch of diverse idiots.
It's a very funny story, and the BBC is like the dad dancing corporation. I mean, it just makes a fool of itself.
They said it's an admin error. We've missed out heterosexual. That's our state broadcaster.
I think the BBC is so straight and so heterosexual that it just omitted to put in the obvious box to check.
But would you?
But I don't think the future of the BBC rests on a survey of local reports.
No, it isn't. But
about whether or not the word straight.
But Sammy, can you imagine the uproar if they hadn't included trans or bisexual or lesbian? But I tell you what, let's leave heterosexual out because the world's
What do you mean? What is this? This is uproar.
No,
this is uproar.
Well, it is uproar because it annoys me.
Of the straight community who is using his podium to cause uproar.
Sammy was order, Sammy.
Jeremy, what I think a lot of people will say watching this programme is that Ed can laugh off this survey where heterosexuals are disregarded by BBC. My view of this is that this reflects the deep-seated problem with the BBC.
Completely agree.
That it doesn't represent ordinary people any longer. And whether that's true about sexual orientation surveys, or its view on Brexit, or its view on climate change, or its view on elites imposing their will on people. And don't forget, I mean, this is what happens, of course. The BBC now decides, for using my money and using your money and everybody else's money, decides what is good news, what is bad news, what slant the news should have, what news should be reported. And deep-seated within the BBC, I believe, is this bias. And that survey, while you may laugh about it, that survey shows the deep-seated bias within the BBC, where it's now chasing this agenda that minority sexual orientations should be promoted.
I really don't think the BBC are promoting that. I'm laughing. I am laughing.
Right,
this is a great comedy segment from the Jeremy and Sammy show.
Deep-seated bias amongst the BBC.
In this kind of BBC conspiracy to turn everybody gay or something. I mean, it's crazy.
No, and that's not what I said. I said it reflects the thinking within the BBC.
Every company does surveys like this. Even Times Radio has diversity targets in who appears on its programmes.
The views of ordinary people, and indeed the opinions of the majority of the population, do not have and are not properly reflected.
I think that is
Are straight white male and female people allowed to be on and listen to Times Radio? Yes or no?
Yes, they are.
Well, apparently, according to the BBC, if you're straight and not gay and you're white and you're male or female, you're stuffed. I'm being serious, man. What's wrong with him? Sammy, I'm with you, mate. You know what liberals do, don't they?
Look,
apart from failing to get in the cabinet. What they do is, when they haven't got an answer, they laugh. You're wrong here, mate.
It's
People
not for me to promote a rival broadcaster in the BBC.
Jeremy,
are you telling me that millions of normal people are not listening to BBC Radio 2, for example? Which is
they've turned up in their droves since Ken Bruce left.
As mainstream as it possibly could be.
Since Ken Bruce
and
left,
you did the same with Ken Bruce. It's a conspiracy to take away ordinary broadcasters when Ken Bruce had been offered a very nice package by a rival commercial.
Next time you come on, you've got to have a shave. Final word, Sammy Wilson. I agree with you, my friend. It's an the BBC needs to be, on a serious note, more answerable, doesn't it?
No, I think that the BBC needs to be put in the marketplace along with all of the other competitors that will give us all a better service. You subscribe to those services you want to subscribe to that provide the services and the kind of programs that you want to hear. You don't subscribe to the ones you don't want to hear and see. And that, to me, is... And I would have thought that Ed Vaizey would have been more, as a Conservative, would have taken that free market approach rather than this public service.
Well, don't forget, Sammy, Conservatives believe in institutions. Until the Brexit Party took over and smashed every institution.
Right, listen, you two.
A lovely Brexit dig there at the end from Ed Vaizey. He's another one of those Tories who, during any other time, we would all despise. But the likes of 30p Lee makes him seem quite reasonable. Sammy got through the entire right-wing BBC bingo card there, didn't he? Left-wing propagandists, Labour lovies, anti-white, anti-heterosexual, blah blah blah. So, just to clarify, the BBC responded to the claim they deliberately left off the heterosexual box from this survey, and they have said it was an oversight, an error. And that really goes without saying for anybody who chooses to engage the portion of their brain that processes rational thought. I'm not sure I agree with Vaizey when he says the BBC are prone to these type of gaffes. It's an enormous organisation, and the entire right wing, be it the Mail, Express, Sun, Talk TV, GB News, as well as most of the Conservative government, are out to destroy it. So naturally, they will turn these tiny stories, which affect barely anybody, into this hysterical tornado. You'd think Sammy Wilson would acknowledge the BBC are in favour of the union, but he doesn't even have it in him to say even the slightest thing in their favour. Probably because he is still blaming them for thwarting his beloved hard Brexit. Anyway, I'll have to end it there because there are builders upstairs and I'm struggling to record between their sporadic episodes of drilling. So, cheers for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment because it helps me out. And I'll catch you again soon. All the best.